The Galactic Council chamber shone like a second sun suspended above the marble plains of Valira Prime, light refracting through its crystal dome as 1,000 alien delegates filled the air with laughter, voices of 100 species blending into a cruel choir. They laughed not from joy but from superiority, the kind that comes from too much comfort and too little memory. At the center of the hall stood the Terran ambassador, alone beneath the pillars of light, his black uniform plain, his posture calm, his face unreadable. He had spoken only of peace, of cooperation, of the value of restraint, and they had laughed at him for it. The Speaker of the Council, a towering figure of obsidian scales and golden eyes, leaned forward on his throne and said with a smirk, "Tell me, human, how does your fragile world intend to police the stars when it can barely hold its own atmosphere?" The hall erupted again, glass walls vibrating with their amusement. The ambassador did not answer. Immediately, he let their voices crash around him like waves breaking on a silent shore, and when the noise finally began to die, he bowed slightly and said only one sentence, his voice calm and steady. "Thank you for reminding us what you think of us." Then he turned and walked away, leaving his translator unit hovering behind him like a ghost, recording every word. No one noticed that as he passed through the exit arch. His left hand brushed against the security terminal, a movement too small to mean anything, and yet the screen blinked for half a second before returning to normal. Outside the Council Tower, the twin suns of Valira Prime burned red over the horizon. The Terran shuttle waited on the landing platform, its design old by galactic standards, almost primitive, but inside, it pulsed with quiet power. The ambassador entered without a word, and the engines engaged without a single flare of light. The ship rose silently and vanished into the upper atmosphere, leaving behind nothing but a whisper of ion trails. Within the council chamber, the laughter continued, the Speaker raising his hands to silence the room only long enough to deliver one last insult. "It amazes me," he said, "that Earth still thinks diplomacy works when it has no armies left to support it." More laughter, louder this time, but across the galaxy, somewhere deep within the cold blue oceans of Earth, machines that had slept for centuries began to wake. Old command bunkers hidden beneath the polar ice caps flickered to life, silent lights crawling across their walls like veins remembering the flow of blood. In orbit above Earth, satellites once thought decommissioned adjusted their positions by fractions of degrees, realigning into patterns too precise to be random. Deep beneath the Martian colonies, forgotten mining tunnels revealed corridors lined with ancient steel, doors opening one by one. The hum of fusion cores reverberating through the rock, and in the void beyond Pluto, something vast began to move, a shadow among shadows. A ship so large it blotted out starlight, its hull unmarked, its engines silent, its presence alone bending the space around it. It had been built long before the Council believed humanity capable of such power, and it had waited, dormant, for this moment, its internal systems awakening with a voice that spoke across encrypted frequencies. Protocol echo activated, awaiting command. Back on Valira Prime, hours later, the Speaker received reports of minor disruptions along the outer networks, data delays, sensor interference near Terran space. He dismissed them with a wave of his hand. "Technical noise," he said. "They can't even maintain their own satellites, much less interfere with ours." But the communications minister looked uneasy. "Sir, these signals are precise, synchronized to Council frequency intervals." The Speaker's tone sharpened. "Are you suggesting Earth has the capability to intercept our encrypted transmissions?" "No, sir," the minister said quickly, "just unusual behavior." "Then ignore it," the Speaker snapped. "They are a dying world clinging to a memory of relevance." And he turned away, unaware that the room's holographic display briefly glitched, the symbol of the Terran spiral flashing for less than a heartbeat before vanishing. On the shuttle returning to Earth, the ambassador sat in silence, his reflection in the glass showing the lines of exhaustion and something colder beneath them. His aide, a young officer with sharp eyes, finally spoke. "They won't listen, sir," he said. "They never do." The ambassador nodded. "They don't need to," he said quietly. "We weren't there to talk. We were there to measure how far they've drifted from reason." "And now?" the aide asked. "Now?" The ambassador said, his voice a whisper that carried the weight of centuries. "We remind them." He looked out at the stars, the Council's shining worlds glimmering like jewels scattered across the void. "They've forgotten who taught them unity, who held the line when the Orion fires burned half the galaxy. They believe peace was theirs to claim, not ours to maintain." He paused, eyes narrowing. That illusion ends tonight. The aide swallowed hard. Operation Echo? The ambassador nodded once. Send the code. Full activation. In the Terran command complex buried beneath the Atlantic Trench, alarms began to pulse softly, not in warning but in awakening. A voice filled the dark halls, calm, digital, ancient, Echo protocol confirmed, initiating system synchronization. One by one, reactors re-engaged, weapons platforms recalibrated, orbital stations long thought dead came online. Invisible to the Council's sensors because they had never truly left. Humanity had not disarmed. It had hidden. It had not surrendered. It had gone quiet, studying, learning, waiting. In the vacuum of silence, Earth had turned inward, its wars ending, its divisions fading, its armies becoming one. Not under flags but under purpose. They no longer fought each other. They prepared for the day they would have to remind the galaxy why they had survived when so many others had fallen. By the time the Council's evening session began, the outer sectors were already dark, reports flooded in, lost signals, missing patrols, communications blackouts. But arrogance is a disease that dulls the senses, and the Council dismissed it all. Coincidence, said one, solar interference, said another, pirates, said a third, but Saren, the old historian who had spent his life studying Earth's forgotten wars, felt his stomach tighten. He turned to the speaker and said, "Do you know what their silence means?" The speaker laughed. "That they've run out of words." Saren's voice dropped lower. "No, it means they've stopped warning us." In the Terran war room, Director Hale received the transmission from the ambassador. "The Council has confirmed their ignorance." The message read. Hale smiled faintly. "Then the first stage begins. Across the solar system, hidden human fleets stirred, their engines igniting with a light that didn't glow but consumed. Each ship's core powered by quantum reactors the Council's brightest minds had once called impossible. The stars themselves reflected their awakening. Thousands of vessels rising. From beneath oceans, ice, and stone, some older than the current empires, some newly built in secret shipyards under Mars and Europa. Humanity's silence was ending, and it would end like a whisper cutting through glass. The Speaker of the Council sat in his private office that night, his reflection cast against the window, stars burning quietly beyond. He smiled to himself, arrogance comforting him like a cloak. "Humans," he muttered, "still dreaming they matter." Outside, far beyond the orbit of his world, the first Terran signal reached its destination, a pulse of energy invisible to most sensors, yet powerful enough to rewrite every navigation grid within 20 light-years. The Council's patrol fleets began drifting off course, communications rerouted through false relays that reported normal status even as they moved deeper into human-controlled space. By dawn, the Council would lose contact with 24 ships, and by the next cycle, they would lose everything else. In the command dome of Earth, Hale watched as the holographic map turned red with enemy markers. Then slowly, one by one, the red faded to gray. No explosions, no debris, just silence. "First engagement complete," reported the AI. "Council patrols neutralized, 0 human casualties." Hale nodded, his voice low. "Continue containment." "Acknowledged," replied the AI, and the room fell quiet again. The only sound the low hum of systems sinking across light years. Humanity's strength was never in its technology, it was in its unity, the kind forged not by domination but by shared pain. They had learned long ago that the universe doesn't listen to speeches, only to consequences, and now the galaxy would learn the same lesson. By the time the Council noticed the scale of what was happening, it was too late. Their fleets were gone, their satellites hijacked, their defenses blind, and in their panic they realized the truth too late. Earth had not been weak, it had been patient. In their arrogance they had mistaken restraint for fragility, when in reality it was discipline, a discipline forged through centuries of survival. Humanity didn't conquer because it didn't need to. It corrected, quietly, precisely, like a hand brushing dust off an old map. The galaxy had thought Earth forgotten, but history does not forget its architects, and as the Council scrambled to understand what they had awakened, a final Terran transmission reached every world at once. Just 4 words spoken in that same calm voice the ambassador had used in the chamber. "Peace requires maintenance, remember." And then the signal ended, leaving the universe drenched in the same silence that had begun it all. The silence of a species that had learned long ago that strength is not in shouting, but in knowing exactly when to stop talking. Beneath the cold blue oceans of Earth, Far below the noise of its cities and the calm deception of its skies, something ancient stirred awake. For years the world above had played its role perfectly, humble, quiet, invisible among the empires that ruled the stars. But beneath the crust, beneath miles of stone and steel, lay the truth of humanity's patience. The silence had not been weakness, it had been calculation. Deep within the Atlantic trench, the Terran Strategic Command Dome flickered to life, its walls humming with power as dormant systems awoke one by one. Digital minds whispering through encrypted frequencies, protocol echo, confirmed. The voice was calm, mechanical yet almost reverent. In the darkness, reactors ignited like veins of fire beneath glass, casting a crimson glow across control panels that had not seen light in centuries. In orbit, old satellites once thought dead came online, their signals realigning into constellations too precise to be random, each one linking to the next until the entire solar system hummed in harmony, connecting Earth, Mars, and the colonies scattered through the black, in hidden facilities under the Martian surface. Engineers looked up as the ceiling lights pulsed white. "Is this a drill?" one asked nervously. His commander stared at the monitor, the Terran spiral slowly rotating on the screen. "No," he whispered, "it's real." At that same moment on Earth, Director Hale stood before the central hologram in the command dome, his expression unreadable. "The Council laughed today," he said softly, "and now they will listen." His aide, Lieutenant Myra, hesitated. "Sir, activation means full mobilization. They'll see it, let them," Hale replied. "We built this system under their noses for 200 years. If they notice now, it only proves how blind they've been." The lights around him shifted to deep blue, the symbol of Terran readiness. The silence of Earth was over. Far across the galaxy, on Valira Prime, the Council's communications division detected strange fluctuations, encrypted bursts of energy traveling through hyperspace. The readings were unlike anything they had seen: tight, disciplined, mathematical. Origin: Sol system. One officer reported, low-level interference, probably natural. His superior nodded without interest. "Ignore it. Humans are still using chemical rockets," the young officer frowned. "Sir, the pattern repeats every 6 seconds. It's intentional," the superior laughed. "Then they've learned to tap their own transmitters." How tragic, the laughter returned. The same hollow sound that had filled the chamber hours before. But miles away, in the shadows of the city, Saren, the old historian, looked at the night sky through his telescope and felt a chill. He saw nothing, yet something deep in his instincts stirred: silence. He murmured, "They've gone silent again." And, for the first time in his long life, he didn't find comfort in it. Back on Earth, inside the command dome, the ground vibrated softly as massive elevators rose from the sea, hidden structures emerging from the waves like metallic mountains, their surfaces engraved with Terran sigils older than most Council civilizations. Massive hangars opened, revealing ships with dark, angular hulls, built not for intimidation but for perfection. They emitted no heat, no signal, nothing that sensors could trace. They were ghosts of war, designed to exist unseen until it was too late. The engineers on site worked in silence, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of data streams. "Power at 87%, one reported. "Neural coordination stable," another confirmed. "Fleet synchronization complete." The Ari's voice echoed through the hall. "Humanity is ready." Hale stood before the main window, watching the Pacific horizon as the first dawn of activation rose. "We gave them peace," he said quietly, "and they mistook it for surrender. Now we give them silence, and they will call it fear." Myra approached carefully, her tone soft. "Sir, the public networks are still unaware. Should we issue a cover story?" Hale turned slightly, his expression calm but sharp. "No, the people don't need to know. They've suffered enough. The galaxy needs to remember, not us." He paused, his voice lower now. "This is not vengeance, it's maintenance." She nodded, understanding the weight of his words even if she couldn't yet feel it. In orbit, the Terran defense grid reactivated, its stations blinking into existence across every planet, moon, and asteroid of the solar system, each one silent, efficient, precise. For 2 centuries, humanity had lived beneath the watchful eye of those who believed themselves superior. Now the watchers were being watched, and they didn't even know it. In the Council archives, Saren began combing through records of Earth's past wars, his aged fingers trembling as he scrolled through data most had forgotten. He read about the great collapses, the unifications. The 1,000 conflicts that had carved humanity into something the galaxy could not understand. They were always at war, he whispered to himself. But not because they loved it, because they adapted to it. The more he read, the colder he felt. You fools, he muttered under his breath. You mocked the one species that never needed to evolve. They already became what the universe demanded. Meanwhile, in the highest chamber of the council, the speaker signed trade agreements, his laughter echoing through the halls as he dismissed a worried minister. If humans could fight back, they would have done it long ago, he said. They don't have the resources. But even as he spoke, his comms terminal flickered, showing a brief static pulse. A sound like a human heartbeat. Before clearing, back on Earth, in a vast subterranean chamber beneath Antarctica, a giant reactor core came online, glowing deep gold. Lines of Terran soldiers stood silently as the power wave surged upward through the facility, lighting up miles of underground cities. We are online across all stations, reported the chief operator. Mars reports readiness, Luna reports readiness, Europa fleet initialized. The room vibrated with quiet awe. These were not soldiers of conquest. They were the descendants of a species that had waited. This is not war, Hale said through the global channel, his voice echoing through every base. This is memory, and memory is discipline. Outside, the auroras danced across the sky as the magnetic shields of Earth realigned, the planet itself glowing faintly as if remembering its purpose. At the edge of Terran space, along the Orion boundary, the first alien scouts picked up faint transmissions, fragments of human code repeating in rhythmic pulses. They sent back warnings to the Council, but the messages never arrived. They were intercepted mid-transit, erased without trace. A shadow passed through their senses, and then there was nothing, not destruction, not battle, just emptiness where fleets once were, back in the command dome. Hale watched as the first operation report appeared. On the hologram, outer probes neutralized, no casualties. Myra looked at the screen, her voice trembling. Sir, they won't understand what we're doing. Hale nodded slowly. That's the point, he said. Understanding leads to resistance, confusion leads to control. His tone softened. We'll let them think they're safe, until the moment they remember our name. Across the galaxy, the Council's laughter began to fade, replaced by murmurs of uncertainty, strange signals, missing fleets, unexplained blackouts. Saren sat alone in his study, listening to the deep hum of the planet beneath his feet. The same hum he now recognized as the sound of silence spreading. It's too late, he whispered, they've already started. He looked up at the stars and imagined the humans moving through the void. Calm, efficient, patient, no fury, no fire, just inevitability. Humanity's quiet response was no longer a rumor. It was the tremor that would shake the stars. And somewhere deep in the dark, an old Terran proverb whispered across encrypted waves. The loudest threat is the one that never needs to speak. The first signs appeared in whispers carried through the void. Council patrol ships that should have reported hours ago fell silent. Outposts that once glowed bright with life now drifted cold and empty. The communications minister tried to reassure the Council, calling it technical error. But the silence spread like a disease, unseen yet unstoppable. Across the galaxy lights began to fade, one sector after another. Each message that tried to leave human space vanished before it reached its destination. The speaker still mocked the idea, his arrogance the armor of a dying age. Do you think the Terrans can reach us? He said, his voice sharp and prideful. They are insects pretending to be giants. But his words sounded hollow even to him. The Council's chamber felt smaller now, the air thinner, as if the universe itself were listening. Saren stood near the back, silent as always, his old eyes fixed on the stars flickering outside the dome. They've gone quiet again, he murmured. And that's when they move. No one heard him over the noise of denial. At the edge of the Orion Rift, a fleet of Council warships patrolled the border, their commanders confident, their vessels armed with weapons of unimaginable power. They didn't know that every signal they sent was already intercepted, their navigation feeds rewritten, their trajectories adjusted by mere fractions of a degree, one by one. Their scanners failed, their lights dimmed, and in the final moments before the blackout, the lead admiral saw something on his view screen, a shape emerging. From the dark, massive, silent, black as the void itself, it wasn't a ship, it was a shadow with purpose. Before he could speak, the screen turned to static, then nothing. The fleet vanished without trace. No explosions, no wreckage, just silence. When the council reviewed the data, the last recorded signal was a single human voice whispering, "We heard you." On Earth, Director Hale stood before the central hologram as reports flooded in from across the solar network. Operation Echo Phase 1 complete, the AI confirmed, 7 to 6 council fleets neutralized, 0 human losses. Myra's voice trembled as she looked at the glowing data. "Sir, the council will retaliate. This is war." Hale shook his head. "No, this is correction," he said. "They laughed because they thought we forgot how to fight. But war is not fighting, it's control, and control doesn't need blood." He watched as one by one, the council's defense grids blinked out of existence. Entire regions of space folding into Terran silence. "They called us weak," he said quietly. "They mistook mercy for fear," Myra whispered. "And now?" "Now," Hale said, "they'll learn what silence sounds like when it answers back." On Valira Prime, panic had begun to take root. The council's communications hub overflowed with error codes. Ministers shouting over each other as the speaker slammed his claws against the console. "I want answers," he roared. "Who is doing this?" "Unknown interference, sir," replied a trembling technician. "Origin points shift constantly. The signals look like reflections." "Reflections?" the speaker barked. "From where?" "Everywhere," the technician whispered, and the room fell silent. The holographic map above them flickered, stars turning red one by one, and then dark. Saren closed his eyes. "It's too late," he said softly. "They've already surrounded us, we just haven't noticed it yet." The speaker turned, his rage breaking through fear. "How do you fight an enemy you can't see?" Saren met his gaze, his voice quiet. "You don't." In the Terran command dome, Hale watched as the AI projected council chatter across the room, fear rising in every intercepted broadcast. "They're fracturing," said Myra. "Their alliances are collapsing." Hale nodded. "That's the point," he said. "When the proud panic, they turn on each other. We don't need to strike their worlds, we let them destroy their own trust." He leaned forward, his face illuminated by the faint blue glow. "Humanity doesn't win by might. It wins by patience." The AI confirmed, Stage 2 ready, infiltration complete. And Hale said the words that would echo across 1,000 worlds. "Begin the quiet war." Across the galaxy, council fleets began to misfire, their targeting systems locking on friendly ships, their reactors overloading with false commands. Chaos erupted in every sector. Commanders screamed over broken comms as ships exploded in orbit around their own worlds. Entire systems darkened, power grids flickered, and the stars themselves seemed to fade. But through it all, humanity never broadcast a single word of victory. No transmissions, no threats, only a signal pattern repeating. Quietly through the void, a heartbeat, steady and human, heard by every sensor array in the galaxy. "Why do they do this?" One council admiral shouted as his fleet died around him. "Why not just destroy us?" But there was no answer, because destruction was never the goal, it was understanding, and understanding was always more terrifying. On the moon base overlooking Earth, Admiral Rhea Dalton watched the holofeeds in silence, her face pale in the reflected light of dying stars. "They're falling apart faster than expected," said her first officer. "No resistance left in the Veil sectors." Rhea's voice was low, controlled. "They were never built for resistance," she said, "only for pride." She turned to the viewport, watching the Earth below, its lights calm, its oceans glowing faintly from the orbital shields. "We gave them peace," she said, "and they made it weakness. Now we give them silence, and they'll call it cruelty." She looked to her officer. "We don't celebrate this, understand? We observe it." The man nodded, and Rhea whispered, "History doesn't repeat, it remembers." Meanwhile, Saren, sitting in his dark chamber on Valira, received a secret transmission from an untraceable source. It was faint, distorted, but when he played it, he froze. The screen showed a single Terran symbol spinning slowly, and a voice spoke, calm, emotionless, yet undeniably human. "Do not fear. We are not your enemy, we are your consequence." Saren leaned back in his chair, tears forming in his tired eyes. "They're not attacking us," he whispered, "they're teaching us." But no one would listen. No one ever did. Back on Earth, Hale stood over the glowing map of the galaxy. Thousands of red lights fading into nothing. "Report," he said. "Outer sectors neutralized. Communication grid fully absorbed," replied the AI. "Council hub isolated. Then hold position, Hale said. Let them sit in their silence. Myra looked at him. Sir, what if they surrender? Hale looked at her, his voice calm, steady as stone. They already have, outside, beyond the walls of the command dome. The stars above Earth shone brighter than ever, each one reflecting on the oceans below like a mirror of human patience. The galaxy would never laugh again, not because it feared humanity's wrath, but because it had finally learned the sound of its silence. The Council's capital world no longer glowed with its usual brilliance, its skies dimmed by the haze of fear that had settled like a shadow across the great spires of Valira Prime. Entire sectors of the galaxy had gone dark, fleets were missing, trade routes silent, and still no one dared say the word out loud, humanity. It hung in every breath, in every broken transmission. But the speaker refused to accept it. Standing before the hollow chamber that once thundered with arrogance, his voice trembled with the illusion of command. They are only humans, he said, a forgotten race with forgotten tools. His words echoed through the empty seats of the council, the delegates too afraid to speak, their eyes fixed on the great hologram hovering above them. A star map filled with red lights that blinked out one by one, systems lost, worlds gone silent. There was no smoke, no fire, no wreckage, just absence, and that was worse than war. Saren stood near the base of the dais, his frail hands clasped behind his back, his voice soft but steady. You do not understand them. You never did. They are not conquerors, they are reminders. The speaker turned sharply. Reminders of what? Of what happens when you forget to listen, Saren said. In the void between stars, the Terran fleet moved like a shadow stretching across infinity, ships vast and black, their hulls reflecting no light, their presence undetectable except for the faint tremor they left in space itself. Aboard the flagship Eidolon, Admiral Rear Dalton watched the displays flicker as systems across the galaxy shut down. Council defenses neutralized, reported her officer. Their fleets are disarmed. Command structures offline. Rear nodded slowly. And civilian grids? Untouched. Good, she said quietly. We're not here to destroy, only to correct. Her eyes hardened as she turned toward the viewport, watching the distant shimmer of a dying sun over a council world. They mocked our silence, she whispered. And now silence is all that remains. Her words fell like iron in the quiet hum of the bridge. Around her the crew worked in disciplined silence, every movement measured, every breath controlled. They weren't soldiers seeking glory. They were surgeons, cleaning infection from a decaying body. On Valira Prime, panic turned into despair. Citizens flooded the streets, staring at the skies where the stars no longer looked familiar. Every constellation they knew had changed because the satellites that framed their night had vanished. Children cried, elders prayed, and the powerful hid. The speaker shouted for reports from the outer colonies, but none came. Where are my fleets? He demanded. Where is the armada? The communications officer stammered. Gone, sir, no trace. How? The speaker roared. How can an entire fleet vanish? Saren looked at him with hollow eyes. The same way your conscience did, he said, quietly. The speaker struck the table in rage, but no one reacted. They were all staring at the ceiling where a faint hum filled the air. It wasn't a sound exactly, more like the feeling of pressure against their chests. And then the lights flickered, screens turned black, and a single image appeared, the Terran spiral glowing white against the dark, followed by 4 words that froze the entire council in place. We remember your laughter. In the command dome on Earth, Hale stood before the holographic galaxy, watching as sector after sector fell into silence. The message has been delivered, the AI reported, its voice calm and monotone. Council systems are paralyzed, defense protocols overridden, no casualties reported. Hale nodded. Good. Maintain passive observation. We strike only when provoked. Myra looked up from her console, her voice low. Sir, some worlds are panicking. Food shortages, riots. They'll collapse without support. Hale's expression didn't change. Let them, he said softly. Collapse teaches humility faster than any weapon, and humility is the only language the galaxy understands. She frowned. Sir, is this justice? Hale turned toward her slowly, his gaze distant but sharp. No, Lieutenant. This is equilibrium. Justice requires emotion. And emotion is what got them here. We simply restore balance. On the Eidolon, Rear received the latest report from the Council's inner systems. Their capital stands, Voss said. But they're isolated, No contact beyond their atmosphere. Then we wait, Rhea replied. If they've learned nothing, they'll reach out again. And when they do, we'll answer. Not with words but with consequence. Her eyes softened slightly. The worst punishment is to live long enough to understand what you've done. She turned to her officers. Prepare the transmission, visual. Only, no sound. On the bridge screen, the image of the council chamber appeared. Terrified leaders staring up at the faint glow of the Terran spiral projected above their world. Rhea watched them for a moment, then said, "End it." The screen went dark, no threats, no orders, no demands, just silence. On Valira, Saren sat alone in his quarters, the faint light of dying systems flickering across his face. He opened an old data file from his archives, one that contained the last known Terran broadcast from centuries ago. It was a recording of a human scientist speaking before their fall, his voice calm and clear. The day will come when silence is not peace, but warning. Saren closed his eyes as the words echoed through his room. Outside, faint shapes moved across the sky, massive and distant. Shadows that blocked the light of stars. He whispered, "They are here, not in fear, but in awe," because deep down, he knew humanity had not come to destroy, they had come to teach, and the lesson was written in every flickering light that died above his world. Back in the council hall, the speaker collapsed into his chair, his voice a whisper, "Why didn't they kill us?" Saren turned to him, his tone almost gentle. "Because that's not who they are. Then what are they?" The speaker asked, trembling. "The mirror you refused to look into," Saren said. "They are what we pretended to be." Outside, the first Terran ship passed across the dawn sky of Valira, silent and immense, its shadow falling across the capital like an eclipse. No sound, no attack, only the reminder that power didn't need to roar to be feared. In the Terran dome, Hale watched the live feed, his voice quiet, almost sorrowful. "Let them rebuild. But let them remember, peace born from fear is still peace, and that's all the galaxy deserves." When night fell on Valira, the citizens gathered in silence, staring at the faint spiral glowing faintly above their horizon. It pulsed once, twice, and then vanished, leaving only stars. Saren looked up and whispered, "They're gone." But he knew better. Humanity didn't leave. They just returned to waiting, because patience had always been their sharpest weapon. In the void, the Eidolon and its fleet drifted away like phantoms, their engines cold, their signatures erased. The galaxy would call it mercy, but to humanity, it was maintenance, order restored, the universe reminded of its place. And as the last trace of Terran presence faded from Valira's sky, one message lingered in every heart that dared remember it. When they laugh again, we will return. The galaxy lay in the grip of silence, not the peace of understanding but the silence of fear, a fragile stillness that stretched between the stars like a wound too deep to heal. On Valira Prime, the once proud capital of the Council, the great towers stood dim and cracked, the air heavy with regret. The laughter that had once echoed through its chambers was gone, replaced by whispers that trembled at the sound of their own voices. No one spoke the word human anymore. It was forbidden, not by law but by instinct, because that word carried the weight of memory, of the moment when pride turned to dust. Yet among the ruins, Saren walked slowly through the empty streets. The old historian who had warned them all, his cane tapping softly against the stone, his eyes searching the horizon where the stars looked cold and unfamiliar. "We forgot who we were," he whispered to himself, "and they remembered for us." Above him, the night sky flickered faintly, strange lights dancing for a moment before fading again, signals perhaps, or maybe just ghosts. But every time they appeared, every being on the planet froze, afraid to breathe, because the memory of Earth's silence still haunted them like the shadow of a storm. In the Terran command dome buried beneath the ocean, Director Hale stood before the massive holographic projection of the galaxy, blue and gold threads pulsing where life still flourished, and black voids where arrogance had once ruled. Council sectors stabilized, the AI reported, no further hostilities detected. Hale's expression did not soften. "Good," he said quietly. "Let them rebuild under the weight of their own memory." Myra, standing beside him, hesitated before asking, "Sir, what if they rise again? What if they forget?" Hale's gaze turned distant, almost sorrowful. "Then we remind them again," he said. "That is what we are now, the custodians of consequence." He turned away from the screen, the reflection of the stars shimmering across his face like faint ghosts. "They think silence is peace, but But silence is the sound of patience waiting to be provoked. His voice dropped lower. And patience is the sharpest blade humanity ever forged. Across the void, aboard the Eidolon, Admiral Rear Dalton stared into the dark expanse beyond her viewport, her reflection a ghost against the glass. Status? She asked quietly. All fleets standing down, replied Voss. No activity from the Council core worlds, outer colonies report compliance. She nodded, but there was no satisfaction in her tone. They don't comply out of respect, she said. They comply because they're afraid, and fear fades, always. She turned to her officer. That's when we'll return. She walked toward the center of the bridge, her boots echoing softly. My father once told me silence is mercy, she said. He was wrong. Silence is survival, and survival is what humanity perfected when the rest of the galaxy stopped evolving. She looked out again at the endless stars, her voice barely a whisper. We became their myth, because truth is too terrifying for them to live with. On Valira, the speaker sat alone in the ruins of the council chamber, his once glittering robes torn and dulled, the gold embroidery now blackened by dust. He stared at the old holographic console before him, its surface cracked, the last remnants of their communication network dead. Why didn't they destroy us? He murmured, his voice breaking. Why leave us like this? Saren stood behind him, silent for a long time before answering. Because destruction would make you a victim, but survival makes you a lesson. The speaker looked up at him with hollow eyes. And what lesson is that? Saren sighed. That peace cannot be mocked, that silence cannot be dismissed, that mercy cannot be mistaken for weakness. The speaker laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and painful. You sound like them. Perhaps, Saren replied softly, or perhaps I simply learned. He turned to the cracked window where the sky shimmered faintly. They're still watching, you know, he said. Not to rule, not to conquer, just to see if we remember. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, deep in a region once dominated by the Council Armada, the remnants of those fleets drifted lifeless, empty hulls floating like monuments to arrogance. Terran drones moved among them silently, gathering data, repairing nothing, destroying nothing, just observing, recording, ensuring that the evidence of humanity's restraint remained untouched. For every shattered ship and burnt-out station was proof that power did not require brutality, that vengeance did not need noise. Each one carried the same mark etched into the metal. A spiral, small and perfect, glowing faintly even in the dark, the mark of Earth, a symbol that now stood for balance, and wherever it appeared, the galaxy remembered to be quiet. Back on Earth, beneath the Atlantic, Hale stood alone in the observation hall. The room filled with the gentle hum of machinery. He looked up at the massive window that showed the ocean above, schools of glowing fish swimming through the deep blue currents. Do you think they'll ever forgive us? Myra asked softly behind him. Hale smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it. Forgiveness requires understanding, he said. And they still think we wanted revenge. They'll never understand that we only wanted silence. She nodded slowly, her eyes wet with unspoken questions. And what about us, sir? Do we ever stop watching? Hale's gaze hardened. When the stars stop burning, he said, and turned away. In the shadows of deep space, aboard the Eidolon, Rear walked through the darkened corridors toward the observation deck. The ship was quiet now, most of the crew in stasis, only a few sentinels maintaining the systems. She placed her hand on the cold glass, watching as distant suns flickered in the distance. She whispered, "They'll build again. They always do." Her voice carried a mixture of sadness and pride. But when they look up at the sky and see the stars dim, they'll remember who dimmed them first. She closed her eyes. We're not their destroyers, we're their mirror. On Valira, generations would pass, the scars of fear fading into myth. The younger ones would whisper stories of the silent war, of the humans who came without warning and left without a word. They called them the quiet ones, guardians or ghosts. Depending on who told the tale, temples were built, prayers offered to the invisible watchers among the stars. And though the council rebuilt its cities, it never rebuilt its arrogance. Because every time they began to laugh again, the night sky would flicker once, just once, and the laughter would die in their throats. In the command dome, Hale stood once more before the great hologram, the galaxy slowly rotating before him, a living monument to restraint and memory. Report, he said quietly, all systems stable. The AI replied, council communication normalized, no signs of rebellion. Good, Hale said, then we rest. Myra smiled faintly. Do you think they'll remember this time? He looked at her, his eyes tired but unwavering. They'll forget, he said. They always do. He turned back to the stars, his reflection blending into them. But that's why we're here. And so the universe settled into uneasy silence once more, a silence not born of peace, but of fear wrapped in understanding. And among the stars drifted the unseen fleet of humanity, patient, eternal, waiting, because humanity had learned what no other species could grasp. That victory was not destruction. It was endurance, and endurance required no audience, no applause, only time. And time was the one weapon the galaxy would never take from them. For in every breath of quiet, in every star, that blinked just a second too long, there was the echo of Earth, whispering softly, we never left. Centuries passed like breaths drawn and forgotten, and the galaxy began to heal from the scars left by its own arrogance. The Council rebuilt its cities, its fleets, and its confidence. Yet something had changed forever in the hearts of those who remembered. They no longer spoke of humanity as myth or relic. They spoke of them as balance, as inevitability, as the storm that came when the stars laughed too loud. On Valira Prime the rebuilt towers gleamed once again, their domes shining with the light of twin suns, but beneath their beauty lingered unease. The people did not look at the night sky with wonder anymore. They looked with caution, as if afraid that a single glance too proud might call the silence back. Children grew up under that fear, taught never to mock the unknown, never to forget the story of the quiet ones who came from the blue world at the edge of the galaxy. And still, somewhere deep in the galaxy's heart, a quiet whisper lingered in the comms of every ship, every world, a pulse that came every few years, a Terran signal, faint, patient, saying nothing and meaning everything. On Earth, the oceans were calm again. The world had changed into something that no longer resembled the human civilizations the Council once mocked. The skies above the Atlantic shimmered with invisible shields. The continents now gardens of steel and light, deep beneath the surface. The Terran command dome still pulsed with the same heartbeat it had for centuries. Though only a few humans still entered its sacred halls, Director Hale was long gone. But his words lived on through the system itself, his voice replayed every year at the anniversary of the silence. We do not conquer, we correct, we do not rule, we remind. Humanity had not vanished. It had transcended the need for presence. Its fleet still watched the galaxy through a web of unseen satellites and shadow drones that circled every known world. And when the systems detected the faintest signs of arrogance rising again, black markets forming, empires boasting, species beginning to forget, the network stirred, not to strike, but to observe, waiting, watching, reminding. On Valira, an old priest stood in the center of a great hall built over the ruins of the former council chamber. His robes were white and gray, his eyes clouded with age. He taught a group of young scholars who sat in silence before him. Do you know why the Terrans spared us? He asked, his voice echoing softly. One young alien raised a trembling hand. Because they were merciful? The priest smiled sadly. No, because they were tired. Mercy is for equals. And we never were, they spared us. Because they saw we could still learn. He turned toward the great glass dome above, the stars glimmering faintly beyond. Every empire believes it is eternal until it meets humanity, and then it learns eternity belongs only to silence. His students said nothing, their faces pale in the dim light. Outside the hall, the faint hum of an orbital probe filled the air, Terran-built. Still functional after hundreds of years, it rotated slowly. Always watching, never interfering, the galaxy had tried to bury its past, but the past had buried the galaxy instead. Far across the stars, in the ruins of an old battle site near the Orion Rift, a small salvage crew from one of the newer empires came across something impossible. A Terran ship, intact, untouched by time, its black hull gleaming beneath the cold light of a distant sun. They approached with trembling curiosity, scanners reporting no power, no life, but as their shuttle drew near, the Terran symbol on the hull flared softly, white against the void. The crew froze as their systems went silent. Every console flickering out, a voice filled their ship, soft and calm, the same tone recorded in 1,000 fearful memories. Do not repeat history, it said, or history will repeat you. And then the light faded, the Terran ship vanishing into mist as if it had never been there. When the salvage crew returned home, their eyes were hollow, and they said nothing. But their empire began dismantling its weapons within the month. no one questioned why. On Earth, in the silent dome beneath the ocean, Myra's words were etched on the walls of the memorial chamber, her message left long after her death. They called us monsters, but we were the only ones who learned to love peace enough to defend it. Above her name, the holographic map of the galaxy still shimmered, now dotted with thousands of green lights marking worlds at peace. A balance humanity had built not with threats but with memory. Each flicker of light carried a story, each silence a warning, and though humanity's cities were now quiet, its influence reached further than any empire had ever dared. For even the stars themselves adjusted when Earth commanded it. Through systems so advanced they appeared divine, humans had not ascended into gods, they had simply perfected consequence. On Valira, Saren's descendants kept his journals locked in the planetary archive, forbidden to read them except on the day of silence. Once a year they opened the great chamber, read his words aloud, and remembered what had happened to the galaxy when arrogance met patience. His final entry read, "They did not roar, they did not conquer, they simply corrected the course of history, and left us to decide if we deserve to exist in it." The crowd would listen in quiet awe, then kneel, looking to the stars where the Terran signal still pulsed every few years, and when the hum came again, faint but undeniable, every world stopped what it was doing, every voice went quiet. Because even after centuries, that sound still carried the same meaning. It meant that humanity was listening. And somewhere deep in uncharted space, aboard the Eidolon, humanity's flagship still drifted, preserved and functional. Its AI voice echoing through the silent corridors, fleet status, dormant, galaxy stability, maintained, command authority, Earth. Inside the main chamber, holograms of Hale, Rear Dalton, and Myra stood frozen in time, programmed to awaken only when the stars once again trembled with war. The ship was a ghost now, but it was a living one, an eternal sentinel, humanity's last whisper across eternity. The galaxy might have forgotten their faces, but it never forgot their silence, and the silence was enough, because when words fail civilizations, silence is what keeps them alive. And so the universe turned quietly, its vast empires small beneath the weight of memory, its rulers cautious beneath the shadow of unseen watchers, and through it all, humanity remained what it had become long ago. The steady pulse beneath creation, the whisper in the dark, the patient teacher that waited for its students to forget so it could remind them once more, and every few centuries, when the stars grew too loud and the laughter began again, the Terran signal would flicker to life. The spiral would glow across the heavens, and a voice would speak, calm and unshaken, "We remember." And that was enough to shake the galaxy to its core, for when the galaxy mocked the quiet, humanity answered not with words, not with war, but with a silence that the stars themselves could feel. The stars had grown old, their light slower, their fire dimmer, yet across the endless dark the echo of humanity's silence still lingered like a pulse through the void. The galaxies had shifted, new empires had risen, new species had claimed dominion, and yet none dared to touch the blue world at the edge of the map, Earth, the forbidden origin, the quiet heart of history. On Valira Prime the rebuilt council met again for the first time in 1,000 years. Its chambers restored to marble brilliance, banners of unity stretched high, their voices calm and proud once more. The speaker, a new one now, young and ambitious, addressed the gathered delegates. "It has been ages since the silent war," he said. "Humanity has vanished, their world sealed, their fleets dormant. We are free again to lead this galaxy into light." The crowd murmured in approval, relieved, hopeful, and proud. Only one old historian, descended from Saren's line, did not join in their applause. His name was Loran, and his voice was a quiet tremor as he whispered, "You've forgotten the first rule." But no one heard him over the sound of renewed arrogance. That night the council's celebrations spread across their world. Fireworks shimmered above the cities. Music filled the air, and laughter returned to the halls that had once trembled with fear. But laughter has a cost, and somewhere beyond the outer rim, senses that had slept for centuries opened their eyes, far from any sun. The Eidolon stirred in the void, her hull gleaming faintly as ancient systems came alive one by one. The Ari's voice broke the silence for the first time in millennia. Council activity detected, arrogance threshold exceeded. And with those words the great engines of the Terran fleet awoke, in the command dome beneath Earth's oceans. The deep circuits that had once fallen quiet flared to life, echoing with Hale's old voice. His words preserved forever in the code that guided the species that refused to die. "If they ever laugh again, remind them. And Earth answered with a low hum that rippled through the stars, invisible, unstoppable, like the return of a long-forgotten storm. On Valira, the night sky shimmered strangely, the twin moons dimming as an aurora of silver light spread across the heavens. The speaker paused his speech as the stars seemed to move, an atmospheric anomaly, said one scientist nervously. But before the words could finish, every communication device on the planet activated at once. Screens, lights, and projectors flickered alive, showing the symbol that had not been seen for 1,000 years. The Terran spiral, burning white, rotating slowly. Across every world of the Council, every ship, every home, that symbol appeared, and with it came no voice, no warning, just a silence so profound it made hearts stop. Then a single message blinked across the screens in simple, ancient Terran text: "We warned you once." Panic followed like a shadow, fleets scrambled, scientists shouted over one another, trying to trace the source. But there was no source. The signal came from everywhere and nowhere, light years apart yet perfectly synchronized. The speaker, pale and trembling, shouted, "Contact them. We must reason with them." Loran stepped forward, his voice low. "You can't reason with a mirror," he said. "You can only accept what it shows you." Outside the great dome, the air shimmered as something vast entered the system, dark shapes sliding from hyperspace without light or sound. Ships older than their civilization, larger than their moons, they drifted like ghosts across the sky, their surfaces black and perfect, absorbing all light. And in that moment every being on Valira understood that the legends were not myth. Humanity had never left. They had simply waited. From orbit, the Terran fleet deployed no weapons, no armies. They released instead a wave of light that passed through every network, every weapon system, every database, and rewrote it, gently, completely, wiping away centuries of pride, leaving behind only silence. Across the galaxy the same light passed through every empire, resetting everything back to balance. No destruction, no death, just an impossible stillness. When the light faded, the ships were gone, leaving the stars burning brighter. Their paths cleared of arrogance once again. On Valira the speaker fell to his knees, his voice breaking. "They could have killed us all." Loran stood beside him, his eyes filled with both sorrow and awe. "They did something worse," he said softly. "They reminded us again." On Earth, deep within the ocean, the dome glowed softly as the RE's sensors dimmed back to blue. Council corrected. It said in Hale's voice, "Peace restored." Silence returned to the depths. The planet breathed quietly, unchanged, unmoved, eternal. Above, the clouds swirled over blue seas. The same view the galaxy had mocked so long ago. And in the dark beyond the solar system, the Eidolon once again drifted to rest, her lights fading, her systems falling asleep, her last transmission echoing softly through the void, balance maintained. Generations later, children on 100 worlds learned the story again. They called it the Second Silence. And every storyteller ended it the same way, saying, "They came not to punish, but to remind." When asked where humanity was now, no one had an answer. Some said they ascended beyond the stars. Others whispered they lived among the dark between galaxies, unseen, eternal, waiting for the day arrogance bloomed again. And in those whispers, beneath every tale, there was always one truth, repeated like a heartbeat, that silence is not peace, silence is warning. And when the galaxy laughs, Earth listens. And so the universe continued to spin under the quiet watch of a species that had outlasted hate, outlasted time, and outlasted pride. Humanity's voice gone from words to memory, from sound to presence. They needed no armies, no empires, only patience. For they had learned that to rule the stars one must first master silence. And in the cold glow of 1,000 galaxies, whenever the stars flickered, civilizations would pause, look upward, and remember the promise carved into the void itself. When you mock the quiet, you wake the storm, and when the storm passes, you will thank the silence for sparing you. Because the galaxy had called it power, had called it vengeance, but humanity, steady and eternal, called it what it had always been, just another day.